When capitalism collapses, it will not happen overnight, but through slow, visible fractures spreading across everyday life. The system does not fall with explosions first, but with quiet stress felt in jobs, prices, and trust. Capitalism collapses when the promise of hard work no longer guarantees stability or dignity. History shows systems break when inequality grows faster than hope can keep up. Capitalism begins failing when wealth pools upward and pressure crushes the foundation below. Inflation silently erodes belief faster than any protest ever could. When food, housing, and healthcare outpace wages, the system enters danger territory. Capitalism collapses socially before it collapses economically. Trust disappears first between workers, institutions, and the future itself. Debt becomes a chain when growth no longer outpaces interest. Capitalism relies on endless growth inside a world with limits. When growth slows, the cracks become impossible to hide. Automation accelerates collapse by removing labor without replacing meaning. Capitalism survives crises but weakens each time it is patched instead of fixed. Bailouts save systems temporarily but anger permanently. Social unrest signals economic illness long before collapse headlines appear. Capitalism collapses psychologically when people stop believing tomorrow will be better. Young generations losing faith accelerates systemic decay. When ownership becomes impossible, consumption becomes resentment. Capitalism collapses differently in every country, but follows the same pattern. First, stability erodes, then legitimacy, then control. Governments delay collapse by borrowing from the future. Eventually, the bill arrives without warning. Capitalism collapses when people choose survival over participation. Barter replaces brands when money loses meaning. Systems fall when alternatives feel safer than obedience. Capitalism does not collapse on a date, but in stages. Collapse feels slow, then sudden. By the time it is obvious, it is already too late. The real question is not when capitalism collapses, but how prepared you are. Capitalism shows stress when basic survival becomes a luxury instead of a guarantee. When working full-time still means falling behind, the system begins cracking. Capitalism depends on confidence and collapses when fear replaces optimism. Financial markets panic long before society understands why. When speculation outweighs production, the system loses balance. Capitalism survives only while people believe rules apply equally. Once fairness disappears, legitimacy collapses rapidly. Corporate monopolies signal late-stage capitalism nearing exhaustion. Capitalism weakens when competition dies and control concentrates. Debt-fueled consumption hides collapse until it can no longer be ignored.
Capitalism feeds on future promises that eventually expire. When pensions fail, faith in long-term systems vanishes. Capitalism collapses faster when crises stack without recovery time. Climate pressure adds weight to an already stressed system. Resource scarcity transforms markets into battlegrounds. Capitalism cannot price a future it destroys. Collapse begins mentally before it appears physically. When survival planning replaces career planning, the shift has begun. Capitalism relies on participation and fails when people opt out. Underground economies emerge as trust in official systems fades. Cash loses relevance when stability disappears. Capitalism fractures differently across classes, but collapse unites outcomes. The middle class erodes before the system admits danger. Once stability feels temporary, collapse accelerates. Capitalism collapses quietly before it collapses loudly. By the time headlines warn, people have already adapted. Collapse is not chaos, but reorganization under pressure. Capitalism ends when alternatives outperform obedience. People choose certainty over ideology when survival is threatened. Collapse feels personal long before it becomes political. Capitalism collapses when daily life requires constant emergency decisions. Systems fail when resilience shifts from institutions to individuals. Capitalism depends on scale, but collapses under fragility. Supply chains breaking reveal how thin stability truly was. Capitalism hides risk until pressure exposes it everywhere at once. When insurance fails, fear replaces planning. Capitalism collapses when trust evaporates faster than solutions appear. Public confidence disappears long before official announcements. Capitalism fractures when rules bend only for the powerful. Once injustice becomes normalized, collapse accelerates.
Capitalism cannot survive without social consent. When participation feels forced, resistance grows quietly. Capitalism collapses in trust before it collapses in numbers. Metrics can hide decay, but not forever. Capitalism breaks when survival knowledge replaces financial literacy. People stop investing when the future feels unstable. Capitalism needs belief more than it needs money. When belief collapses, behavior follows. Capitalism survives cycles, but not permanent distrust. Collapse becomes inevitable when repair costs exceed benefits. Capitalism collapses when effort no longer equals reward. At that point, people disengage mentally first. Capitalism ends when survival becomes decentralized. Local systems replace global dependence. Collapse looks like adaptation from inside it. Capitalism fades as new structures quietly take shape. The transition is uneven, uncomfortable, and misunderstood. Collapse does not feel dramatic until looking back. Capitalism collapses when it no longer serves survival. The end begins quietly with changed behavior, not broken buildings. Capitalism collapses when people emotionally detach from the system entirely. Detachment spreads faster than panic ever could. Capitalism loses power when fear stops motivating obedience. People stop chasing growth and start chasing safety. Capitalism collapses when survival replaces ambition. Ambition dies quietly before collapse becomes visible. Capitalism cannot function without future belief. When tomorrow feels uncertain, spending behavior changes immediately. Capitalism breaks when people stop taking risks. Risk avoidance signals deep systemic fear. Capitalism collapses when cooperation replaces competition. Communities form as markets weaken. Capitalism fades when people rely on each other. Local trust replaces distant systems. Capitalism collapses when money loses authority. Authority shifts toward skills and resilience. Capitalism cannot survive skill-based survival. Collapse empowers those who adapt fastest. Capitalism collapses unevenly across populations. Some feel it early, others deny it longer. Denial delays action, but not outcomes. Capitalism collapses regardless of belief. Systems fail independent of opinion. Collapse happens when adaptation outpaces control. Capitalism cannot control decentralized survival. Control fades as relevance fades. Capitalism collapses when relevance disappears. People move on faster than systems expect. Collapse is recognized only after transition. Capitalism ends quietly, without ceremony. No announcement marks the end. Daily routines simply change. Capitalism collapses unnoticed by many. Only later does history name it. Collapse feels normal from inside it. Capitalism becomes a memory, not a system. Survival becomes the new economy. Adaptation replaces accumulation. Capitalism collapses when life reorganizes itself. The question is not when, but how ready you are.